Welcome to Believe in Packers. I'm your host, Ahman Green Bay Packers all-time leading rusher, along with my good friend and teammate Alex Fernando, sitting there down in Lincoln, Nebraska. How's the weather down there, Alan?
It's actually, today's been beautiful. It's like mid 50s and sunny, no wind. So it's like that beautiful fall day. We're actually getting a couple of those. It's going to rain tomorrow and get all cold again.
Of course. That's the Midwest for you.
It's November. It's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, it was the same thing for me up in Lambeau Field with Detroit coming to town. It was rainy. It didn't get too chilly, which was good. It got down about 50, maybe 45 degrees in rain.
Yeah.
But it could have been colder, right?
In Wisconsin, it can always be colder.
Exactly. It could have been way colder. So I was appreciating that it didn't drop below 30. So very, very happy about that because it's November, and when November hits and December hits, you're on the slate for Mother Nature to do as she pleases. So something I didn't mention real quick, I'll do the read real quick for Bet Online, our sponsors to the show here. So Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds for in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen. So just kind of like a sports book, but online virtually. So with the largest selection of odds, everything from football, NBA, basketball, men's and women's college basketball, NHL, UFC, and MMA, and then also esports too. You could bet on that now. I don't know if you knew that, Alex. Did you know that?
I did not know that. What do you?
You can.
What
you
are
can
the
bet on esports. Yes, you can.
Man, what are the over-under? Like, are you going over-unders or just like money line wins or what?
You can do all of that. That's the fun part.
Oh, man,
spreads. Yep. Spreads, over unders.
I'd like to see the odds on some of those esports bets.
You could go to Bet Online and find out. That's what you could do. So head to Bet Online today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site online wagering. So Bet Online, where the game starts. And so we start with this Packer home field against the Detroit Lions, who leads the NFC North, and the weather didn't matter. We talked about that. You brought it up a lot. A lot of people were actually, you weren't the only one across the whole hemisphere of football, NFL football. Yep. Everybody was kind of harping on that. In my head, I was like, they pros. They should be able to go do this. But
you might think it's gonna be a little bit different. And again, having a whole 2 months of playing indoors. And then their next home or the next game outdoors isn't until they're at the Bears in week
11 or 13 or something like that.
Yeah. So they got another 3, 4, 5 weeks there where they're playing indoors again. That's insane. But I'm just going to say it now. Detroit, I'm sorry. You guys can play outside. You know what you're doing.
They definitely know what they're doing. And like I mentioned earlier, the weather was dreary, rainy, not cold. I mean, cold, but not freezing cold. But I'll say enough to where something I mentioned about their run game. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, those guys are mutters. I say definitely Montgomery. He's a mutter. Yeah. When I say mutter, it's a guy who likes to run in this type of weather. He chops his feet a lot. He gets upfield and he just picks up yak yardage like it's his business, which it is. It's his business to do that. And then even Jahmyr Gibbs got in the groove a little bit, has some big runs right up the middle. He kind of, I don't know if you saw the game, but I know I watched the game and being at the game and saw him slip a little bit, kind of tweaked his knee because that's going to happen trying to stop on the dime with all that speed he has.
Yeah, especially a slippery and wet field like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, seeing the run game and then for golf, where a lot of people all around the hemisphere of football are saying, hey, he is the mid-season MVP right now. He did enough from his point of view as a quarterback to be effective out of the field. He only had about 145 yards passing, but no turnovers, one sack, but held on to the ball with there. But Jordan right now on the other side, he's been throwing his I don't know what number interception, but another interception, and he's been throwing an interception in every game he has played in this year. So I think someone is 10 already. And so right there shows some of the youthfulness still that's in him. He's a young guy. You forget that because he's been so successful from the halfway mark from last year and how he matured into the season. But we know it was a different team last year. They had a guy by the name of Aaron Jones in the backfield that was help. Once he came back from that hammy, then that offense had a run game and didn't have a run game, but it was a little bit more effective. And so it was just different seeing, Jahmyr and Montgomery just pick up those yards. It wasn't a whole lot of yards out there, but they got them in key situations. And I'll say even from a point of the Packers actually out-totaled the Detroit Lions offense overall, but still won by double digits. So it just shows you how good their defense is, and then how effective Jared Goff and the run game was for Detroit to, one, drain that clock, and two, take advantage of the turnovers, because on that one interception, it was an interception where Jordan Love was trying to make something out of nothing. He should have just, took the sack and just held on to the ball, but tried to throw it, and that DB picked it off. And it was not only an interception, but a pick six on top of that. So what is getting to a part of this. So looking at, Jared's analysis of this game, what was the one part where you see he was effective in playing this game against the Packers?
Well, Jared Goff has been doing this same thing all season long, where he does not make the mistakes and turn the ball over. He lets his offense either lean on the run game, or if he needs to step up, he'll be the guy and throw some passes. Just 4 picks all season thus far. And you mentioned that he only had 145 yards. It's going to be a tough match throwing the ball when you're with all the rain and sloppiness. So you're going to lean on the run game. But 4 incompletions, that means he's putting the ball on the mark. When I was watching most of this game, and there was one point where I think he started like 14 of 14 or something like that.
Wow.
It was something nuts. And there was another game where he only had a couple incompletions as well, only like less than 5, I think. And so
109.3 passer rating right there.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I really took away from watching Goff, not just this game, but you've seen it a couple other games this season, but especially in a game with bad weather, tough in the rain, against a very good Packer defense with very good secondary play, is he put that ball only where his guys can get it. He put it on their chest, on the money, because that's how you get very few incompletions, is you make it very catchable for your teammates.
Especially with that first touchdown to Ahman St. Brown. It was a nice route by him, but just putting it in position only where he could catch it, and was still able to get his feet down in inbound. So just showing the due diligence of how you run that route, then also from the quarterback side, Jared's side, the due diligence to make sure that ball is going to get caught. It's going to be caught by Ahman St. Brown, or it's going to go out of bounds on that point.
Absolutely.
So good job by him on that touchdown. I saw that. I was like, yep, feet are down. I saw the time he focused to make sure he taps those feet.
Accurate, and that allows playmakers to do what they do. That allows Amon-Ra to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. That allows Jameson Williams, or I guess he's hurt, but that allows Jahmyr Gibbs to get out in space. That opens up the run game, because you know that you can't stack the box if those receivers are going to have time and space to catch the ball. If that ball is accurate, like Jared Goff does, you are set up.
Yeah.
Hey, Marie.
Alex said hello.
Hey, Al.
She said hey. And so, thank you for that right there. But going into Lions, I already mentioned a little bit already about Montgomery and Gibbs getting into the flow of this game. So what was the most effective part of what you saw from this, getting them 2 running backs picking up yards?
Missing tackles. That's one of the toughest parts, because we talked all week about how key it is in a sloppy game. You got to corral that run game, and the Packers have been really good at tackling all season. We really haven't seen a game where they've been missing so many. And there was a run. This was late in the 4th quarter. It was kind of salting the game away, so people were tired, long game and everything. But there was a run that David Montgomery had where he broke 4 tackles to get a first down on like one of their 1st and 10s. The Packers needed to get a stop, try to force a turnover, or like try to get so they could score again and make it a 1-score game. Right. And they just handed to Montgomery, and I think he had a 12-yard run where he broke 4 tackles and just carried a guy on the last 3 yards. Yes. And you haven't seen that from the Packers this season. It's a tough game when you have your division opponent trying to take the lead in the division at home in the rain. It's a tough show when your tackles get sloppy in that one. That's what really the Detroit run game kind of exposed, is they ran over, around, and through the Packers. And a little bit of retooling with the defense. We'll talk a little bit later about that in the pod. But that was something that really stood out. It was a surprise to me, because I just haven't seen that from the Packers this year. Got to wrap guys up, especially David Montgomery. You got to get 2-3 hats on him and bring him down.
100% there. When you got those 2 guys, and Montgomery basically being bottom heavy, he can definitely run through those tackles, make things a little tough on the defensive back that's got to deal with him. And then
Gibbs is so squirmy too.
Right, exactly. And that's being effective. He only had 17 carries, 73 yards, 4.3 average, so real good average there. But like I said, I just hear my echo real quick. I was like, what? Oh man, that was weird, but threw me off a little bit. But back on it. So, but yeah, having that, effective day out there. Didn't get in the end zone. Jameer did on a kind of a 4th and 1, I say push to just test their defense and ran right in the end zone untouched. So that offensive line is to a point where, when it comes to playoff push, this is something that's going to be their biggest, I say, asset out there, along with everything working together to run with the pass and what have you. But it's going to start with that offensive line for Detroit. And then looking at the Packers run game, even though Josh Jacobs had a great game, he had a really good thing. 13 carries, 95 yards, 7.3 average, but no touchdowns.
So effective,
right
in between the 20s.
Exactly, only in the 20s, but that is
20s.
so
That's
important.
The tough part.
That is the tough part. When you have a good coaching staff, you had Aaron Glenn over there, so he knew exactly what needed to go on. Is between the 20s, let him eat. Let Wilson get some big plays, but once we get in that red zone, let's slow them down. Let's make it tough. And they even made it tough not only for Josh and Wilson, they made it tough for Jordan Love too, trying to find receivers open or try to make time with his legs, but he could not. And that's the part that's going to get Detroit Lions into the playoffs, and into a place where they potentially could get further and further into the playoff run too. Because with the defense, or with the offense, with the defense, once they get to that red zone and being, stingy in the red zone, then that's going to deter a lot of plays being made by the opposing team.
Yeah, that was the thing. That's the other big stat that stood out to me. You mentioned the Packers outgained the Lions by actually 150 yards. They had 20 first downs, Lions just 17, but 1 out of 4 trips to the red zone resulted in points.
Yeah,
you can't do that. It's 25% there. And you also doubled up the Lions in penalties, 10 penalties for 67 yards. And you got to finish those drives off with some points. And it ended up being a 10-point game. Yep. But unfortunately for the Packers, it was 24-6 for a majority of that.
It was until fourth quarter, like you mentioned, kind of garbage play where they were able to get that. And so it wasn't just Jordan either. It wasn't just Jordan. Receivers were dropping the ball, a lot out there. And some of the footing out there was getting guys to slip and fall and not be able to run their routes. And like I said, as a coach, that will drive me nuts, where I know the player can do something beforehand, before the game starts, to say, hey, I'm a professional. I got to make sure I got the shoes that is suitable for this weather, so I don't slip and fall for my quarterback when the ball's coming to me.
Yeah, the elements cause a factor. But one thing I kind of noticed as well is the Packers seem to get very conservative with their play call once they got into the red zone. Like, they've had those issues they've had issues of a few red zone turnovers this year.
Right.
So they seemed less aggressive. And again, you mentioned it. They kind of took the ball away from Josh Jacobs once you got down near the goal line. That's your bulldozer. He will move people out of the way himself.
Make people miss and everything.
Yeah, so I really would like to see the Packers be a bit more aggressive in the red zone. Obviously, you want to take care of the ball, and it's tricky with some elements like that. But be a little more creative. Use Josh Jacobs in a few different ways, and try to get some more points other than just a couple field goals out of that first half. And again, 1 out of 4 trips, we need the Packers to be scoring.
Yeah, exactly. And then shifting over to the defensive side for Lions, definitely impressed. They're able to do a lot and create a lot of damage without Aiden Hutchinson. And so when they've done that in the last several games, that is what impresses me, because when you have a good player go down, sometimes that brings the morale down, and that brings kind of the whole game plan down of some of the players that were built around him, because everybody worked off of Aiden and some of his enthusiasm, and then other guys that were on that defensive line. But there has been no change up. That team is going out there, putting pressure on the quarterback. Jordan Love, before the interception late in the, I think it was like third quarter, before that, first half was rough. He didn't have a whole lot of time. And even when he was giving the ball to Josh and them, like I said, getting the pass to them, or even trying to do the short yardage runs, it was still tough. So I'm definitely excited, definitely interested to see how this defense is going to continue, without Aiden. And then obviously there's some potential with him coming back if they go all the way, to the NFC Championship game or even to the Super Bowl. He could come back for that standpoint. So what did you see out there with this defense without Aiden Hutchinson?
Yeah, the Lions have really impressed. Their run game is a little bit more vulnerable. We saw that again. Josh Jacobs getting 7 yards apiece, but it's kind of still that bend don't break. Like, you'll move between the 20s, that's fine. You get in the red zone, you're not scoring, and they tighten up so well and force those turnovers or force field goals, so you're not walking away with touchdowns. And it's always going to drop. Productivity against the pass rush is going to drop when you lose a player like Aiden Hutchinson. So only 0 sacks, only 1 tackle for loss. but their secondary still 3 pass deflections. They had the pick 6. They love to create havoc in that pass game, and we're able to shut down a lot of the weapons, even with the rough weather. Because remember, the defense got to play in that rough weather. Their foot is slipping. They got to make the cuts, and the secondary is more reactionary to the receivers anyway. The receivers know where their cuts are going to be. They can plan out their footwork. DBs, you are more than often than not the reactionary. So you have to see their feet, you have to see their hips, see what way to go and like adjust yours on the fly, no matter what you are, mid-step, full step. So I think the secondary really has had to step up since Aiden Hutchinson's loss, and being without him for the rest of the season, like that'll be really tough. But their secondary is making some good strides, and they've showed that with the pass deflections and pick 6.
Yep, and I say on the special team side, McManus, he was 2 for 3, missed one of the PAT attempts, I believe, and so that was also another effect of weather. Maybe planting the foot right while you're driving through. I know that was something that between the punters I knew that I played with and the kickers as well, they always make sure pregame, and they also even looked at their cleats too in terms of what that plant foot was wearing on that plant foot. Make sure the right shoe there. So that was also a little cause of concern, but only just that one miss there. So good job with McManus adjusting. But now we talk about the long game, right? So what is the impact of this game right here where Detroit has got to win on the road, even though Green Bay has them in Minnesota, but also Green Bay has Minnesota in Minnesota and 2 Bears game. So how can this game here affect the run for the Packers getting ready for the playoff push come late November, starting in late November, going through December?
Well, again, I kind of said it coming into this game, but that was probably the most important game of the season thus far, with the Packers trying to get the lead in the division. 2 out of the 3 losses are to division opponents. You have the 2-point loss to the Vikings at home. You have the 10-point loss now to the Lions at home. Those are the games in Lambeau you really want to win. And now you got to go – you have a bye, so you're looking good there. Get rested, get ready. But you mentioned you have the Bears twice. The last one's at home, but everything else is on the road. Lions are on the road. Vikings are on the road. So everything else in division are still on the road, and you got to battle back. That's going to be a really tough division. Lions are going to keep winning. All right? I'm going to say it right now. Lions are going to keep winning. They were in the NFC Championship last year. They could very well be there again this year. Vikings got a good path. They were stumbled a couple times, but got their win against Indianapolis last week. They're starting to build back, and they got a good second half of the season. Their next couple games, Jaguars, Titans, Bears, all on the road. But if you're going to play a schedule in the NFL, those are good teams to see.
So, no problem there. Yeah, because of one thing. Oh, sorry, your volume went down. I wasn't sure if you.
I was just like, you got to stay on the path, and Packers got to right the ship. You got to get some road wins later in the season because those teams are going to keep winning. You got to stay heavy in that division.
Yeah, this was something always important to me going into a game, especially this divisional game stuff. Was like I call them the daily doubles because, for one, it's a rival game. You get that animosity or whatever for the fans and the players. Get that all out on the field, but then also come playoff time, you're up a match from the head-to-head and a home and away type of matchup. So if you get them at home, you lose at home, then you get them on at their place, you get that even trade, you get that split. But when you can sweep them, I remember I go back to 2006 season. We didn't have a great season, but that's when the Bears went to the Super Bowl. We were still able to sweep them, even though they were on a Super Bowl season right there. So there is some hope there for the Packers. And even go back to 2005, and that was the last time the Packers, let me see, I just looked up this stat here. In 2005 was the first time since 2005 the Packers have started a division play at 0-2. So hopefully they can bounce back on that in this 0-2 deficit right now, because last year this time they were 3-6 and they were able to win the games they needed, those 6 games to get to the playoffs here too. So they got to look at that. And even McKinney had mentioned that things are not looking good right now for them, that they got to make sure they tune it up and clean it up, because right now they know they got some big games going down the line because all these divisional matchups. That is, I say it's prime. I say it's a prime game to get yourself back in line to get these wins, because then you'll have a lot of momentum like they had last year going into the playoffs. Yeah,
you kind of mentioned it. And any game on your schedule, when you win, that's 1 point. If you win or lose a divisional game, it's kind of like 1.5 though. And that's really, really troublesome when you get to the end of the season and you look back and you're like, oh, we only have 4 or 5 losses, but 3-4 of those losses are to division opponents.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it gets really tricky. And Packers a little bit on that path right now with 2 out of the 3 losses to NFC North teams.
Yep.
So you got to get that right in the back half of the season.
Yep. So with those wins and losses, all starts with the coaches. So I like right now going into this game, Dan Campbell's mindset in terms of how the game plan you saw out there in that field, offensively and defensively through Aaron Glenn, who is the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. I mean, they had it where they basically was going to, they had the adjustments where they understood where Jordan wanted to go with the pass in terms of, and then the defensive players are all seem like almost always in the right position, and the tackling was there for their defense as well in terms of making sure they didn't miss it and getting guys on the ground, but then also putting that pressure, putting certain blitzes in there at the right time. I just saw that where Matt LaFleur was kind of backpedaling adjustment wise, because once he got in the red zone, they kind of was stuck. They wasn't picking a whole lot of yardage there. So I say, if I have to give out a grade or give out a win, that's where Dan Campbell and his coaching staff did their job game planning this Packer offense, knowing that they like to use Josh Jacobs, they like to get the run going, but they also like to do the little short passes to the tight ends and some to their wide receivers that are really effective once they do get in the ball. Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, and those guys didn't get mentioned a whole lot until the end of the game when they started to get their kind of scrap points that were put on the board to make the game 24-14. So good job to Dan Campbell, his staff. So that'll be something going indoors here in another month when they face these Lions again. That would be on my mind as Matt LaFleur going into this game on how we could not score in the red zone. Yeah,
especially because if you really go back and watch this game, Dan Campbell changes his defensive looks when you get in the red zone.
And I think that's key.
One of the trickiest things.
Key.
Yeah, that's one of the trickiest things about playing the Lions. It looks very different when you're moving the ball between the 20s, racking up all these yards like, oh, yeah, we got 400-plus yards on the day. But then you look at the scoreboard like, wait, we haven't scored yet. Because it's a totally different look when you get past that 20, 25-yard line. Dan Campbell changes it, and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't the same defense we've seen. And those short passes, those open receivers, those run lanes, those are all different. They're in different spots, and your blocking has to set up differently. And that's the adjustments that Dan Campbell has really forced teams to try to do. And sometimes it comes a little bit too late. You saw Matt LaFleur in this one. He talked about it post-game. Like, they really struggled finishing in the red zone because of these different looks.
Yeah, so that'll be emphasis number one, scoring in the red, and just scoring, period, red zone or not. You got to have your best plays or your best mindset going in as a coach. Or like, this is what we're going to do, because we got to show something to that defense they hadn't seen before to make sure we get the ball in the end zone. Yeah, I mean, if I'm able to get 3 points, I'm happy, but I'm not satisfied. So that's the mindset going in. Once you get that ball in the red zone, you're going to get the gusto and make sure you got plays that throw the defense off and keeping them in the right position, to be honest. And they'll get basically paid for if they're sitting in the wrong position or the wrong coverage. If they blitz at the wrong time, take advantage of that. And that's getting the players up to snuff, of seeing the adjustments that can happen on the run and things that what they can do on that. So now we got the Packers sitting on a bye week here. It's tough, right? You come off a loss. It's always good going into bye week with the win, but this year it wasn't that. And I think it was kind of the same last year going into bye week. So what is some evaluation for this Packer offense? And I say all three facets: offense, defense, special team, that you got to that you see. I'm gonna mention what I see as well, that they need to get tuned up during this bye week to get ready for the Bears coming out of the bye.
Well, when you lose going into the bye, it is tough. But one silver lining is you got a lot of things on your mind, and that is number one on your mind. You're like, all right, we got to fix this feeling first and foremost. So you are a little extra focused during your bye week, in all honesty. Like, yeah, you get your break, you get to rest up. But when you come back to practice following that bye week, or whenever you get back in the gym and stuff, you're like, okay, I know this feeling, and it's still stuck right there in my chest. Like, I want to get this out. So you have that focus that's coming out in the bye week. Where I think the areas of improvement come is you made the good improvement at kicker for special teams with bringing in McManus. So that's been made. Look at some options in the return game. That's something with the new NFL kick return. Few teams are really taking an aggressive approach and trying to do it. Packers are one of those that have been more reserved. They're like, okay, we'll just waive it. We'll let they haven't set up many returns. A lot of times they're just kind of taking the ball out of the 2025 like you would, but there's some ability in the return game, and I've seen some more teams break it. I think the Packers have some talented return men.
They do. Keyshawn Nixon right now, he's like last game he averaged 26.5 yards per kick return. So that's where you could set up a nice little trap play up the middle or some kick out block.
Yeah, and that's the
plays
thing
with the way the setup now is.
That's the thing with the new kickoff rules. You have to be a little more strategic with how your kick return is designed, because essentially it's like a play at the line of scrimmage, and one guy just starts with a really big run. So you have to be more careful with your blocking and your run lanes there. So I think there's some opportunities there. That's maybe one of the areas just to spark things up, because a big special teams play can wake up your offense and respond to teams quickly. So that's something that I think the Packers can do.
Yeah.
Offense,
what you got?
Offensively, Jordan Love, we got to hold on the ball, man.
We got to keep it in our possession, right?
We cannot keep throwing that thing away. That is your baby. You cannot let that go.
15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and 7 sacks so far at the halfway mark.
Yeah, and remember, he's missed a few games. So that's not a good look when you're throwing an interception in every single game you played, and you've missed a couple, and you got double digits halfway through the season. So you gotta be smart with that ball and be a little bit more accurate. I know there's some drops in that last game, but there's a few balls that made it really difficult for those catches to occur, and that's kind of where those drops came from. So we know Jordan Love can do this. We've seen him play well last year, and maybe that bye week's kind of what he needs to get right. Remember, he had the injury a couple weeks ago, so he probably wasn't 100% playing in the rain, in the slop against Detroit. So you got a bye week to get rested. Start going through your progressions a little bit more, work through that playbook a little bit more, and really analyze those opposing defenses, because they've been giving you headaches, and that's okay. That's going to happen. You're playing in the league, man. It's big boy ball, but we got to hold on to that rock. So a little bit smarter throws. You have so many weapons, so it doesn't always have to be forced. You got the big arm, but use those checkdowns, use those open guys.
Yeah, and a lot of that might have been the weight on the fact that his groin was still healing. Maybe it was that, and hopefully he heals up better, so he get the extra week to heal up, get that groin right. So then the passes are still accurate, because I still seen him doing them back foot throws, which I'm not a fan of, and he should know better than that, being a professional. But yeah, I agree with you with his progression, going through that, being detailed in terms of when you go through that progression. Once you see the open receiver, you see that open space, get the ball to the guy. Don't hesitate. Don't second guess yourself, and then be accurate. Make sure you work on that during the break. When you come back, make sure you are targeting properly, putting that ball placement in the spaces where only your receiver catch it, or nobody catches the ball off. Or you know what? Just keep the ball, take the sack, live to the next down. You only back maybe 5 or 6 yards. 10 at the most, but then you still got an opportunity to get a first down, because you still have the ball. It's not a turnover on that standpoint too.
We talked about it a couple weeks ago when they played the Rams. A year ago when he played the Rams in the second half, because he didn't have much in the first half, but in the second half, he only had like two incompletions, had 100-some yards and a touchdown pass. It's because he waited and he was patient and he analyzed the defense and found those lanes. He hasn't been doing that as much this year. Yeah. And you've seen him burst out a little bit more in the second half of games, and that's where a little bit more of the touchdown passes have come. Yeah. But he's forcing a lot of throws early in the first half and early in the game before he really settles in. And that's where you need to take those easier check down throws or just easier route patterns. Yep. Go through your progression, be a little patient. Those big lanes will open up later in the game. Yep. You'll have a few busted coverages coming your way.
Exactly. And that's somewhere where him and Matt LaFleur and whoever is the quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator, can't remember right now, but they get together and put together the packages of the things he likes to throw, the plays, the routes, and even ask the other players, to the receivers, what plays do you like to run? Because that is where you get everybody, in a good situation, because they know the routes, they know the nuances of the route, where they're going to either put an extra shake, a little head movement, all that to get the DB to take on, going to one direction and deacon them going to the left. And I remember coaches asking me those questions, Ahman, what's your favorite play to run in this situation? If it's red zone, if it's out in the field, or if it's, on our goal line going in or our goal line coming out. Either way, I'll say this. Yeah, I like ISO. I like power. I like power toss. You know what? In that situation, let's do a screenplay just to throw the defense, something where they don't expect to see that, in that situation, because where we're aligned on the football field. So asking those questions, getting those guys, kind of thinking outside the box, and you could come out of this bye week a little bit free. And obviously healthy. I mentioned already, you get that groin, and other players can also heal up. But I would say I want to bring up real quick before we get wrapped up here is one of the biggest, I say, movements of a player on the defensive side of the ball, which I was like, oh my goodness.
I was too when I saw this update.
Yeah, I was like, Preston Smith is gone. I'm like, oh my goodness. So this right here happened, I guess, yesterday. Is the trade deadline was this week, and actually trade deadline started early this year.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
It moved up.
It moved up. So in the one of the last, I would say kind of a casualty to the Packers is the fact they lost Preston Smith, defensive end, has been a Pro Bowler, has been a leader on that defense. And where did he go? I forgot.
He went to the Steelers.
The Steelers. So he is in Pittsburgh now. So he still has some gold on him, but he has black mixed with it and not green. So there you go. But I say to all the defensive coordinators that he's had in the last 5-6 years of his career as a Packer, one was beyond using him as a rusher, an edge rusher. Every now and then, the defensive coordinators, I think they got a little too, I say not using him properly. So a little bit too creative, putting him in the drop coverage. And I'm like, no, this is a guy, he rushes the quarterback. Don't waste his time dropping him into the hard flat or the curl flat. Don't do that. I say, if you do that on the first play of the drive, and then that's it. After that, let him go to the quarterback. He is a guy who liked to rush the quarterback, because I remember when him and the other Smith, the Darius Smith that was there on the roster a couple years ago, that was a problem. Yeah. And now we have Ignabare on the other side and him coming in, and now he's gone. So it's going to be interesting who they're going to have replacing them. Let me jump to the stats. But what are your thoughts on how the effectiveness of that defense is going to be without a Preston Smith?
Well, the unfortunate thing is he hasn't been effective, and that's why he wanted to be traded. He actually requested this trade.
And that part too, when you said that off before we got going today, I was like, what? He requested? Man.
Yeah, here's a quote in the article about it. He said, quote, "I didn't feel like I was being useful enough in the system, and it wasn't catering to my play style moving forward." So, I mean, credit to him to understand that, hey, this new defense, it ain't for me, and I'm not going to be my best player for the team. I'm also not going to be my best player for myself if you're in this new system. And that's from Jeff Hafley, the new defensive coordinator. He replaced Joe Barry, and he moved them from a 3-4 scheme to a 4-3. And so Smith essentially moved to an outside linebacker, or from outside linebacker to defensive end in a 4-3. And it's not quite the same look. You're rushing against different angles. You are doing different stints on the offensive line, and you're responsible for different gaps. And as you mentioned, they're dropping him even out of the end spot into coverage stuff. So it's just it's just an interesting spot for him that hasn't been very effective. And it sucks, honestly, because he's such a great player, and he's been
a good leader too. Good leader in the locker room.
Exactly. He's been a great leader for the Packers, specifically for his core part of his career. He's been with the Packers since 2019. So the last 5 years, half a decade, you make a lot of relationships. You make a lot of leadership roles in that locker room. So it's going to be a very interesting look, and you got to lean on some of your strengths. So Rashawn Gary, he's been around a couple years from the draft from Michigan and stuff. And then you have Xavier McKinney, gets another pick and all that. Like he's one of your veteran guys. Alexander, we've talked about. But it's tough when you lose a leader like Preston Smith.
It is.
And it's always tough adjusting to new defenses. We've seen some success rates from that. The secondary playing very, very well throughout the season. And they're forcing a lot of turnovers. And we'd like to see the Packers do that. But the pass rush hasn't been there quite as much. And Preston Smith not being used in the same system is one of those factors.
Yep. So looking down the rest of the season, we look at not a lot of injuries to report on. Marshawn Lloyd, he's on injury reserve right now, the running back. But you got Wilson that stepped up, doing real good. Zaire Alexander, I think he has he tweaked his knee on the one touchdown catch a couple of weeks ago in Jacksonville. And Josh Myers, the center, he's been out for a couple of weeks, along with Evan Williams, the rookie safety as well. So not a lot of injuries, but those injuries with the bye week, like I said, if you do your job, I remember I had bye weeks that I did not travel. I stayed down in Green Bay and got treatment 3 days a week or 3 times a day. For all those days, I needed to stay home before if I had a knee or ankle or some soft. And the biggest ones are the soft tissue, like the hamstrings or the groins that's dealing with Jordan Love right now. those injuries, those are the ones you really had to be be careful with. With the ankles or a sore shoulder, you could ice it on your own, and that was the treatment pretty much, because once you get that soreness out, then you're starting to feel better day by day and doing the rehab movements as well. So, but if those soft tissue ones, if you don't get on them right away, it take forever, and you can re-aggravate them as well. So hopefully any guys that has those type of injuries, that they heal up coming out of this bye week and then be real fresh for this Bears matchup coming up. And so just to wrap this thing up, let's look ahead toward the second half of the season. We already mentioned some of the games matchup that these Packers got to face. We got, we got the Lions again, we got the Vikings again, we got the Bears 2 times, and we got a couple, I believe, divisional or out of division foes, I think, on the list as well. In some of these matchups here, 49ers, Dolphins, I think they got Saints too late in the season too. Yep. So got some good teams. There are, between our division and the Seahawks, 49ers, we know those are playoff contention teams, but they're a little beat up as well. What do you see the second half the outlook in this terms of these matchups for the Packers going down the line?
Well, one of the great things about Green Bay Packer football is when you come out of this bye week, it is late November, December, and January playing in Wisconsin. Yeah. So this is where that home field advantage and the Lambeau leak and all that is where this comes into play. This is where Packer fans, we need you guys there and being the loud and rowdy bunch that you are. Because when you get a California team coming to your home turf right before Thanksgiving or late November, then you have a Dolphins team from Miami coming to your home turf in Wisconsin in late November. We saw the Dolphins, they can't handle the cold and stuff. So you can get some good key wins. But again, as we mentioned earlier, the divisional wins are really going to make the difference.
Those are the ones.
You can't walk out of this season with 5-6 losses and have 4 of them be to division opponents.
No, it's going to be tough. I said, the Bears coming out of the bye week is a perfect game because it's real easy to get motivated. It was always easy for myself and my teammates to get motivated for them. No matter the time of the year, and no matter, like I said, they had a Super Bowl team. They went to the Super Bowl and we still swept them during the regular season. So throw the records at the door, because guys, it just get a different attitude when you go into that game. And then, like you mentioned, 49ers and Dolphins coming into Lambeau. We don't know what that weather's going to be, but it could be a factor. And if it's not, again, go out there, play mistake-free football, starting with the quarterback, and then Josh Jacobs, getting him, effective like as he been really all year. So that's definitely the best free agent pickup from the all season that has been a bonus and a reward so far. As Josh Jacobs
start using doing his job. Get that man some touchdowns.
A lot more. So he's definitely well on to 1,000 yards, which I'm super excited for. But then you got the Lions and then the Seahawks, those 2 games, both on the road, back to back. They are both night games, so that would probably help with the sleep rest scenario where you got travel. We got going to the East Coast, then travel way out west, and that I'm headed up to that game as well. So I'm gonna be in that stadium. I haven't seen in-person Seahawks game since I think I was a player when we played there, and we lost there in 06 by a few points. So I believe on a Sunday night or Monday night game. But I'm super. So just good to, for myself to be out there, but then for the Packers too. Again, another game they got to definitely prepare for in terms of their rest. Because Seahawks, they're in a good NFC West division, and they won it last year. So that's a team that will not be a walk-off. The only team that might be, not as competitive, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be the Saints. They've had an up and down season. They started off fast, and now they're reeling right now with the fire of Dennis Allen coming down the line, which is never good. We talked about Robert Saleh getting fired from the Jets, and just that mid-season firing of a head coach, not just your OC or a DC or a special teams coordinator. No, the head guy. That's just creates all type of problems for organizations. So we'll see how the Saints season is going at that time. Right now it's still a little rough. And then of course at Vikings, and then back home against the Chicago Bears, which are 2 games that you should be really easy to get jacked up for and go out there and play good football. But again, I hope through all these games, no matter what, play some clean football. That means do not turn the ball over. When you get to the red zone, make sure you're above 50% in the red zone, and make sure that you're balanced on offense and the run game and the pass game, but then on defense as well. And then special teams definitely has to do their part and make sure PATs, field goals are made. And let's get a block punt. Let's get a field goal return, or a kickoff return in there, like you're talking about, having the different schemes that they could match up with how the new setup is for the kickoff. So any of that can happen. We can have a pretty good rest of the season for these Packers. So it'd be something to look forward to see how December ends up. And I say even or how January looks up, because that last game against Chicago is January 5th.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you kind of highlighted, it's all laid out there. You just got to set up and execute, because the Packers have top 10 offenses in 100%. Passing and rushing. They're number 7 in passing and number 4 in rushing. So you have all the tools, but you really got to finish when those drives come to fruition. You can't just move it between the 20s, be happy with 400 plus yards and 14 points. That's really the big difference maker. And yeah, those sparks on special teams, again, that boosts some scoring ability. Those turnovers, you got to cut those down, because that limits your ability to finish drives in the red zone. You'll move all the way to 30, turn it over. That's a missed opportunity. It might not count as a red zone miss, but that's a missed opportunity for points.
Exactly.
So taking care of the football and using all your weapons. You have, again, top 10 offenses on both categories, passing and rushing. Go after it, but take care of that football.
Take care of the ball. So I think we got everything set. And so we got bye week for the Packers, but everybody else is playing. So it's definitely some big matchups coming down the line for this weekend. I know I'm going to be watching college football and pro football this weekend. And shoot, man, we're in November. We got Thanksgiving right around the corner. The year is passing by, as it always does this year, Alex. So great talking to you today. And we'll be back on recap, or I say previewing next week the Bears. Yep. So this is Believe in Packers. I'm your host, Ahman Green, and good friend Alex Fernando. And let's get that Go Pack Go before we get out of here. All right, 1, 2, 3. Go Pack Go. There we go. So see y'all next week, and I hope you have a great weekend. Peace.
Enjoy the bye.
Yep.